void method is a function that does not return a value. So the data type is void, meaning there is no data type. The code we would use to write a void method is what we've already seen in terms of writing methods. We would have an access modifier. In most cases, starting out, it's going to be private, void, the name of our method, and whatever parameters we want to have passed to it in parentheses. We would have a statement or a block of statements that would do something or do several things. But notice there's no return statement in a void method. There's no data to be returned. When we call that method, since we can't return a value, we can't assign a value to a container. So in the case of a void method, we don't use container equals the method name and the arguments. It's just simply method name and arguments. If you're coming from a Visual Basic background, this would be the same thing as a subprocedure or a subroutine. In most other languages, we refer to these as void methods. So here's an example. So I have a button named btn color, and I'm handling the click event. And we've seen void methods because if you look at this event handler, it is a void method. It doesn't return anything. Its access is private, has a void return data type. We have the name of our method, and then our parameters are object sender, comma, event args e. And we've seen that standard in all of our event handlers. The code statement we've written for this button handler is to call another method called changeColor and pass it a text box that we have in our form named txt_original. So when we call that, it's going to come and find the code that we're going to write. That's going to be also a private access. It's a void method, doesn't return anything, named changeColor. Remember, we want to capitalize the first letter. And then our parameter is, we're going to accept a text box data type. We're just going to call it T. And so txt_original goes into the value of T. It's the same object referenced on my form, and so I can set the forecolor of T to color.red and set the back color of T to color.aliceblue. So when we click that button, it hits this code and basically detours to our void method, does this code. When that code is finished, it hits this end curly bracket and comes back, and if there were other statements to be executed here in our event handler, it would do those statements. So you can also think of a method as sort of a little detour to do something and come back. So here's another example of a void method. So I've created an application called void method demo, and I've set the text of my form 1 to be void method demo, showing up in the title bar. I created a list box called LST campuses, and I set the sorted property of that to true. And then I created a button, and we're going to name our button btn populate, and the text is populate list. So I'm going to code this button. Let me get rid of my properties. So I'm going to double click my button, and I get the stub for btn populate _ click. We're handling a click event. Remember, this is a void method in and of itself, so its access is private, doesn't return anything. We have our method name, and then we have our object sender and event args e as our parameters. What I'm going to do here is call a method called add campuses. And it's a method, so I need to put parentheses after it. I'm not going to pass anything to it, but I do need a semicolon. And I get a little red squiggly here because it does not know yet what add campuses is. I need to write that method. So I'm going to come down a couple blank lines, and I'm going to say private void add campuses. And again, nothing in the parentheses. I'm not passing anything to it as far as parameters. And I'll add my curly brackets. Little squigglies go away because now I've defined add campus, although at this point it doesn't do anything. But let's have it do something. So we're going to say LST campuses dot items. We're going to clear whatever is there. And then we're going to add some campuses. So LST campuses.items.add. And of course, we're going to add South Mountain Community College. And I'm simply going to copy that statement. I'm going to add a bunch of campuses here. Let's add Arizona State University. We'll add Northern Arizona University. And we'll add Grand Canyon. Okay, so I have 5 things that little method is going to do. It's going to clear my list box and then add these 4 campuses into my list box. And since I set it to the sorted property true, it should put them in alphabetical order. Let's test this. I click Populate List, and I see the results of the 4 campuses placed into that list box. So what happened here, when I clicked the btn populate, it ran this event procedure, hit the add campuses method call, found add campuses, and then executed all this code. When that stopped, it came back up here, and if there had been more lines, more statements to execute, it would have done so. In this case, it just simply ends. So to further demonstrate that, let me just add another line of code here, messagebox.show, and I'm just going to say, I'm back. And then down here, let's also add a messagebox.show that says, I'm still the add campuses method. All right, let me run this again. Got my semicolon. Let me run this again. So I'm going to click Populate List. I get my 4 campuses. Then I get this message box. I'm still in the Add Campus method. It's down here. Now, as soon as I click OK, it's going to be done with this method, and we'll come back up and pick up the messagebox.show I'm back. And there we go. So that gives a good demonstration of how this detours and returns then to the statement after our add campuses method call. Now, we didn't pass any values in that method call or that method definition. Let's add another void method here that does pass a value to the void method. And what I'm going to do is simply double click on my list box. And so we're going to get a select index changed. I'm going to create a variable that's going to be a string. I'm just going to say chosen equals, and we'll say lst campus dot selected item. That's going to be the text of this item that we clicked on. And I need to convert that to a string. Even though it is a string value, in C# it forces us to do the .toString. If you used to using list boxes in Visual Basic, you don't do that. Not quite sure why there's a discrepancy between the two. Okay, so that's our selected item. Let's call a method of show selection. And what I'm going to pass it is the value of chosen. Chosen is of type string. And so let's create that method. Again, this is going to be private. We're not going to return anything, so it's void show selection. And I'm going to pass it a string value. I'm just going to call it ABC. I can give any variable name that I want, but what happens is the value of chosen becomes the value of my string variable ABC. And I'm going to create a string called prompt. It's going to equal you clicked on, and we're going to concatenate ABC. In fact, let's put ABC inside a single quotes. So I want a literal string with a single quote. And then we'll do a message box dot show of prompt, and my title will simply be your selection. Okay, let's run that. So I'm going to populate my list. I still have those two message boxes in here that's showing the detour and coming back. But now I want to click on an item. Let's click on South Mountain Community College. And I'm told you clicked on South Mountain Community College, and my title is your selection. So when I selected a different index by clicking, it set up string chosen, set the value of that to lstcampuses.selectedItem to string, that was South Mountain Community College, and then it called show selection and passed the value of chosen into my string ABC of the show selection method. And so I have a string prompt, you clicked on, single quote, plus ABC, plus single quote, and that's what I get here for my prompt, because that's what I'm showing in the message box. Message box.show prompt, and my title is your selection. So that's how we pass values to a method, and we can have multiple parameters and multiple arguments. However, the thing to be aware of, however parameters I have here, I must have the same number of arguments, and they must be of the same data type in the same order. So just to demonstrate that, let me come back here. Let's get an integer of, we'll call it chosen int, and it's going to equal LST campuses dot selected index. And so I'm going to pass it chosen and chosen int. And so my parameters, I need to have two parameters here. I have string ABC, and we'll say int I. And my string prompt will be you clicked on ABC. Let's do a new line character, which is item, which is index, put a space in there, and then we'll concatenate I dot toString. Let's run that. So again, I'm going to populate my list. I'm going to click on Northern Arizona University, and I'm told you clicked on Northern Arizona University, which is index 2. Remember, we start counting with 0, 0, 1, 2. And so I'm passing it two things, Northern Arizona University and the index number, and that's what's showing up here. Now, just to demonstrate one thing here, if I changed this and I passed in chosen int, comma, chosen, notice I get a little error here, little squigglies. And it says, argument 1, cannot convert from int to string. Argument 2, cannot convert from string to int. These must be corresponding to the data types of my parameters. The string must come first, and an integer must come second. I'm just going to do a Control Z a couple times to go back to the way we had it. And so that is how we can pass values from our calling statement to our method and use those values.